Hello, everyone. Welcome to Skull Session Live. I'm Mark Givler. Got Kevin in with me here today. Busy weekend on BuckeyeHuddle.com with the Buckeyes back in action. 49-14 over Marshall, 3-0 in the Big Ten play. Some interesting recruiting visitors. I'll kind of, as we talked about last week, probably a lot of in-state guys would be the people to talk about. And that's kind of how it played out. Ohio State offered 2026 Glenville linebacker Cincere Johnson. That's a guy we like quite a bit over at Buckeye Huddle. I think I have him 6 in Ohio and 26. He's in my top. He's pretty high up in my top 10. So this was a guy that I felt, was Ohio State caliber. And the Buckeyes, I think, just wanted to see a little bit of junior film. They were able to do that. Offered him, James Laurinaitis offered him before the game on Saturday, I guess technically Saturday morning if it was before kickoff. So that we'll start there. And we have some video here. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. If you're not, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about Cincere Johnson while the video is going. So if you're just listening, I'll try and keep this easy for you guys who are listening as well. But just a big physical linebacker. I think he's probably going to be a Mike. I know there was a lot of talk about, could he slide down? And that's still not completely out of the realm of possibility, but he's playing at about 225 right now, which is a good weight for him. I think he was probably up a little closer to 235, 240 at one point. So he's trimmed a little bit of weight. We saw Arvell Reese kind of do that a little bit as well. There's a similar frame there and we didn't know if Arvell was going to play D end or linebacker at Ohio State, kind of where his body would take him. And so Cincere Johnson's kind of in that mold as well, but I think he's probably going to stay at linebacker. And again, I think he's more of a Mike linebacker. He's more of an inside guy, very explosive athlete at 6'3", 225, very, very physical kid, plays really one of those north and south linebackers. He can blitz, he can shoot gaps. He can cover, but again, I think he's at his strength is moving north and south, getting in the backfield, getting after ball carriers, getting after the quarterback, and just kind of being a physical presence in the middle of the field. He's a very versatile kid, though. He's played a lot of little different roles with Glenville, just getting their best guys on the field and playing alongside other good players there. So they've had him do a few different things over the years to get him on the field, but settling in nicely as a Mike linebacker right now. Very sure tackler. In addition to being a hard hitter, he's a sure tackler. He doesn't miss much. And just a kid that I've really liked covering. Just a really nice kid and kind of is it one of those kids who's super nice off the field, fairly quiet off the field. But much like Arvell Reese, kind of turns into a different person when the pads go on. And those are the kinds of people you like to cover. But like I said, I'm a big fan of this offer. I think that, the Glenville pipeline obviously is going to continue here. I don't see any real way that he doesn't end up at Ohio State. When that might happen, gosh, who knows? I mean, we've seen the Glenville kids historically drag things out. Now, it used to be they would go all the way until January and they would announce it like the Army Bowl or something. Lately, it's been more of a let's do all the officials and like kind of announce the end of the summer, which is kind of the new like end of the process for a lot of kids now with the summer officials. But, Kevin, just, you've seen a little bit of Cincere at camps, and I know you've watched some film of him. We've talked about him quite a bit over the past 2 years. Just what was your reaction, I guess, to the offer and your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I guess my reaction was about time they offered him. You have a player of that caliber in state and you want to just lock him up. I think Arvell Reese certainly was a proof of concept of what, and every kid is different. You can't say this kid is this kid. It doesn't work that way. But Arvell Reese, who really reopened the Glenville pipeline for Ohio State before there was Bryce West, before there was Demarion Witten, there was, Arvell Reese, and Reese is playing some good ball for Ohio State right now. So you sit there and you look at Cincere Johnson's game, and I mean, he is a high volume tackler. I mean, especially if you have him at the Mike position, I think that, certainly better having him in state than having to chase. And I think that they, realized we need to offer get off the pot. And they offered and I'm sure all of the magical orb of wonderments and everything else will come in and start glowing scarlet and everything else in this one. But we'll see. But yeah, I've seen Glenville play. This is the first year that I've not seen them play in the last couple, just because of the way that schedule's worked out. But he is a solid one, and I will throw some kudos to board regular Mika Hanna, who has been pounding the table for a Cincere Johnson offer. Well, you got it, Mika. So here it is. Now we'll just wait and see when he's ready to make a decision.
Yeah, so the Glenville pipeline continues to look strong. They're not having necessarily. I mean, they got 2 last year. You get Arvell the year before, looking pretty good for Cincere Johnson, to put it mildly, in 26. Look, the players come from where the players come from. Like, I don't think you want to get too wrapped up in like where they come from, but God, it's got to be nice if you're Ryan Day to kind of have that program back producing talent every year. Ted Sr.'s health issues, I think, really caused some issues there for a few years where the talent kind of declined, and he's back and healthy. Kind of I've talked to Ted about this before. Kind of a miraculous story there. He was given very little chance to live, and has beaten cancer, and so it's been a great thing not only for Ohio State to see that pipeline kind of reopen, but I think it's been a great thing for the city of Cleveland, the inner city youth there, to have Ted Sr. back in their lives, healthy, being at the head of the program like he should be, and just being back involved with Cleveland high school football. So it's really been cool. I've been covering Glenville for almost 20 years now, over 15 years now, and they've always been great to us there. And so we're I think you try not to like get too wrapped up in rooting for certain things, but it's nice to see the Glenville program kind of doing what they're doing right now, back-to-back state championships, and in a great position to three-peat. So I kind of wanted to take a moment there and just congratulate those guys on the turnaround the last 5 or 6 years, and just everything that's been going on there, and how they've kind of reinvented the Glenville powerhouse.
Yeah, I mean, it's great seeing Glenville back up there amongst the top teams. And, here the last couple of years, they finally have broken through and gotten that state championship, which has been very elusive throughout Ted Sr.'s coaching career. And now it seems like they're going to lose very few games for the foreseeable future, just because all of these kids that normally would have gone to Glenville that maybe scattered in the wind when there were a lot of question marks about Ted Ginn Sr.'s health are all now back at the Ginn Academy in Cleveland Glenville High School. And they seem to have broken through, but there's always going to be that one game that it's just like where Glenville shouldn't drop it, and then just something stupid happens or whatever. But I think they're finally crossing that Rubicon. Was they limited that in large scale? We're not seeing that inexplicable loss. I mean, even worse when it happened like in the playoffs or whatever. That I think everything is pointed in the right direction there.
Yep, looking good. They got some other young guys. Are any of them like surefire Ohio State kids? I would say not yet, but their 26 and 27 classes are talented. They've got some athlete types, some kind of DB slot receiver types that are pretty interesting. And so we'll see kind of how Ohio State approaches some of these other guys they've got. But Cincere Johnson now with the offer. And again, we would be surprised if he doesn't take that offer at some point, and just kind of a matter of, how much of the recruiting process he wants to take part in. And so we see that often there. But this kind of brings us to a bigger question. How many linebackers should you take every year? You're only playing 2 in a lot of situations. I know there's some 3 linebacker looks, but you're playing 2 for the large majority of the time. You've got 3 in-state linebacker offers already in 2026. So you've got Sincere Johnson, obviously, and then you also have Jacoby Clapper from Cincinnati St. X, and then you've got Storm Miller from Strongsville. And so we've talked about this before they offered any of these guys. We did a podcast like a year ago talking about the 2026 class in Ohio. And the one of the things we said about the 2026 class was we talked about the offensive line, but the other thing we talked about was the depth at linebacker, and like that there are like 5 or 6 linebackers in Ohio in 26 that I think are worth a very close look. And so they've already offered 3, which means they're probably willing to take all 3 at this point. Do you even, I hate to say this, do you even bother going national at linebacker in 26, or do you just kind of like, hey, we're going to get our Ohio linebackers here? And yes, like Cincere, who they are recruiting as a linebacker, has a bigger frame. I think he's going to stay at linebacker. Jacoby Clapper is going to be a linebacker. Storm Miller's got some height to him, some length. Maybe a Mitchell Melton type of prospect there. I don't know, but like it'll be interesting to kind of see for me, Kevin, how they go about this in terms of their numbers and in terms of what they do out of state.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is predicated by the move to 105 and how you handle all of that. But everybody's like, oh, great, you're going to have 20 extra spots. Well, but you also have to make sure that you're not recruiting those 20 extra spots as, hey, you're a plan C, and we're going to, we're going to hold you. We're going to sign and place you in our depth and see if you turn into something in a couple of years. But as for 26 in general, I would say that you sit there and you ride with the 3 in-state guys and you go big game hunting for 1. I guess, because here's the thing. You're not only recruiting against, or not roster management against graduation, but also transfers. And, you could have somebody who gets a little sick and tired of waiting. Here's the right thing elsewhere, sees the right dollar figure elsewhere. I mean, all of these things are very real, not saying it to besmirch the reputation of any of these kids, but, there's a lot of that going on. So if you just sit there and it's like, well, we really think we only need 3, you should probably recruit 1 extra one, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And generally, we don't see at Ohio State a ton of, well, that one caught us off guard, like from the coaching staff. I think Noah Rogers maybe caught some people off guard. So those things do exist. So I think that it's always going to be best to cast a little bit of a wider net. But I think you cast that net, maybe on 2 or 3 reach targets out there. And you know what, if you sit there and you have like 5 linebackers that one in the Ohio State class, 2 out of state and 3 in state, you figure it out at that point. But I mean, I don't think that you prohibit yourself from getting to that point. Put yourself in that tough position down the line, rather than looking at the board going like, well, what are we going to do now? We're sitting here with 2. We waited too long for XYZ. He's off the board and gone forever. Now what?
Yeah, I think that's probably the strategy. Is you take if you can get the 3 Ohio kids together, you take the 3 Ohio kids, and then you put together a list, and maybe it's 3 players, maybe it's even up to 5 players, but you basically look out of state and say, these are the best, like I said, 3 linebackers in America that are not from Ohio. We're only going to recruit those 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it is, and we'll take the first one that jumps in if we can get one of them. And Mika Hanna says Tyler Atkinson would be the 1 national kid. Tyler Atkinson would obviously be a tremendous pickup, and I'm sure if they follow the strategy that I kind of laid out, Tyler Atkinson's going to be on that list for sure. I think he's going to be a tough pull out of SEC country, but you certainly don't need to stop recruiting him. He's visited multiple times, so you've got his attention enough to get him on campus a few times. And we've talked to Tyler a few times at his school. We've gone down to Grayson quite a bit, and we know he does like Ohio State quite a bit. So, that's one guy you keep after. But I think you just sort of, again, try and make your focus the Ohio kids, but then put your list together of 3 or 4 out-of-state kids. If it's like I think Thomas Davis Jr. is really good. You're already you've already got a kid from Weddington in your 25 class in Trajan Odom. You've got Aiden Harris that you're trying to get in 26. His brother Andrew Harris as well is possible. So those three are very close. They do a lot of visits together, a lot of traveling together for recruiting. So I think Thomas Davis Jr. probably goes on that list. And again, that could be a tough pool as well. Georgia legacy. Has Georgia done enough there? That's a question I think needs to be answered. There's, we certainly got some sense down at Weddington earlier that, maybe Georgia needs to pick it up a little bit and not take the legacy for granted there with Thomas Davis Jr. But that could be another tough pull out of the South. But, he's also interested in Notre Dame. So Thomas Davis Jr. has some national interests there and he's exploring. So, that's another name I would throw out there as maybe a guy who's too good to pass up, regardless of what happens with the in-state kids. And another name to remember, and this could end up being a safety, I don't know, but Simeon Caldwell from Bowles School in Jacksonville, literally Tim Walton's nephew, not like slang nephew, but actual nephew, blood nephew, is out there and very high on the Buckeyes. Now, again, the question is he a safety? Is he going to be a linebacker? And I'm being asked, Mika Hanna, what do you think of Simeon Caldwell? I really like Simeon. I like him as a person. I think he's a very smart player. I think he's a very versatile player. He is not quite like what I would call the athletic marvel that like Sonny Styles is, but to that point, I think he could maybe play a role in that vein of let's just get him on our campus, get him in the defense, and we'll move him around as needed and kind of as his body develops. But that's another name I think that people can probably expect Ohio State to continue to recruit. And again, that may be a safety spot. I don't know if he'll factor into their linebacker math, but he may. And he's talked about that with me before. He doesn't care. Some of these kids are like, I have to play this position. I have to be this position. I've talked to Simeon about this. He does not care. He just wants to play football. So he's been very open with just, his positional versatility and the idea that, maybe he's not a defensive back at the next level and, maybe he is a linebacker. So we'll see how that kind of develops. That's another name to kind of keep in mind there. So there's three names that are out-of-state guys who, even if you get your three Ohio kids, you may want to continue to push for those guys as well. So, and I think they will. I don't think they're going to walk away from some of these guys, regardless of what the Ohio kids decide to do. So that was like the biggest thing coming out of the visitor weekend. Another thing to continue to monitor, this is a kid I've been talking about a lot the last couple months, really since June, that we've kind of have or at least I have in their mock class, so to speak, for 2026, even though I hate mock classes, is Jacob Weatherspoon from Avon High School was on campus again, defensive back, corner safety prospect from Avon, Northeast Ohio. He's already been on campus multiple times this season for games, was offered in June. The relationship there with Tim Walton is super strong. That's a kid that, you're asking me who are you super, super confident in terms of it's going to be in this class. He's a kid that's right there at the top of the list for me as far as confidence level of being in the class. He had a great summer. So very talented kid, reminds me a little bit of Simeon Caldwell in the way he carries himself. Very smart kid, very thoughtful, and can tell that carries over to the field. So I'm a big fan of Jacob Weatherspoon's as well. And so he was back on campus, and that could be we talked about Cincere, when's that going to happen with Cincere? And with the Glenville kids, it's always could happen at any time, but they sometimes will make it last longer than people hoped they would make the recruiting process last. But with Weatherspoon, that one's red hot right now. That could go sooner than later. We'll see. Again, the timing thing of the timing process of this is not something I'm particularly interested in. I know everyone always wants to know, well, when are they going to decide? It's when they decide, when they wake up one morning and say, well, I'm ready to decide, or I'm ready to announce my decision date. But I'm more interested in are the Buckeyes getting them, or is someone else getting them? That's kind of, I think, always feel like that's my mission for you guys. But so I feel very good about Jacob Weatherspoon, and again, that one's moving in a very good direction right now. So we'll see how much longer that goes. But that was another big visitor over the weekend. Kevin, with Weatherspoon, and they're in on a lot of good DBs in 26, as you would expect with the way BIA is trending right now, what Tim Walton's got going. Matt Guerrieri's doing a great job. How do you, we're talking about this with the linebackers a little bit. What do you do here with the defensive backs? Because you need to keep rolling these guys every year. And you wonder, like, how many of these out-of-state kids are going to look and be like, well, you've got Devin Sanchez. At least for the moment, you've got Naeem Offord. Jermaine Matthews, Calvin Simpson-Hunt, Aaron Scott looks like he's going to be the next dude in that room. How much do you rely on in-state guys who maybe don't care about that stuff as much versus the out-of-state guys who, if you're a 5-star corner in 26 or whatever it is, you're going to want to play. And they've shown they'll play. I mean, Jermaine Matthews started a game last year. I mean, Aaron Scott's getting out there. But again, is an in-state strategy here with Weatherspoon and Elbert Hill, who I love. I think he's the best player in Ohio right now that Chris Henry Jr. has moved to California. Elbert's my number one guy in Ohio. Like, do you just kind of wrap this up in Ohio this year and do kind of the same thing with defensive back that you're doing at linebacker, which is kind of take those few guys in state and then be like, okay, here's our very short list of out-of-state guys. Let's see what we can get.
Well, the issue here is you can't sit there and have an in-state strategy and then they all drag their feet and make their decisions late in the process. And while Ohio State doesn't generally lose in-state kids that it goes all in on, it happens from time to time. And while people could say, well, you're playing 3 linebackers, well, I mean, you're playing 3 corners. I think playing 3 corners is being a little bit more of a wide-ranging type of situation with your nickel being a corner instead of a safety now. I would not change my defensive back strategy. I would let O.G. Walt and Matt Guerrieri eat. Go out there and get what you can. And I think that you have to explain with a lot of your in-state guys is, we love you. We want you to be in this class. But, we have set a standard here at Ohio State with the BIA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you want to be a signing day guy and you don't make things clear to us prior, you may be left standing at the altar. So I know that probably pains Mika, who is the champion of all things state of Ohio recruiting, but I don't think it's as cut and dry here that you can get away with a in-state and maybe look at a guy out of state. Ohio State is such a hot name in terms of defensive back, both corner and safety recruiting, that you're doing a huge disservice. And this isn't 30 years ago of where you could sit there and win, almost exclusively with just Ohio talent. You've got to spread that net out wide.
Yeah, and just to go back to what we've talked about before with the 2026 depth, we talk about offensive line, talk about linebacker. This doesn't even count Jacob Weatherspoon, who's going to be moving up my board just after seeing him this summer and getting some early game film. I'll go out and see him this fall as well. Before when the rankings first came out, when I did my first 2026 Ohio rankings, I had 2 corners in the top 4 in Ohio, and that was with Chris Henry Jr. at number 1. So now essentially, I'm not saying this is going to exactly shake out this way, but if everyone just moves up because Chris Henry Jr. moves out, I would have 2 corners of my top 3 players in Ohio. And that's probably going to shake out that way when I redo these here soon. But, Elbert Hill and Victor Singleton are like top 100 national kids, in my opinion. I think Elbert Hill's a borderline 5-star kid. And maybe Victor is too. Victor is the prototype body. As far as a corner goes. And he was the best player on the field in a state championship game in December. So he's just still kind of filling out and still learning the game, but he is just an athletic freak. And then you've got Elbert Hill, who's a little on the smaller side, but is just so good technically and so athletic. And then you've got Jacob Weatherspoon. It's like you've got three like stud defensive backs. Now Weatherspoon may be, and even Singleton may be a safety, but you've got this versatility now where you've got this Jordan Hancock position, which can be a corner or a safety body essentially. And then you've got the two outside guys. Like they've got an opportunity here to get three of those guys in state. There's a very unique opportunity here in 26 for them in Ohio. And then, yeah, I mean, Zach Fort from IMG, that's a guy to watch at safety. That's a real guy to watch, especially if the Ohio kids are all corners. You may just get your corners from Ohio, and then now it's big game safety hunting. Unfortunately for Ohio State, Zealous Hicks did commit to Texas, I think this past week. You want to talk about one of my favorite players in the class nationally. Zealous Hicks is just a built-in-a-lab safety, so that was a great get for Texas. But Zach Ford at IMG is a big Ohio State guy. There's other guys we can talk about. Nasir McCoy at Buford, who's already visited this fall. That's a name to kind of keep in mind. Braylon Womack from Mississippi, which is kind of like a running joke with me, is like, okay, so you're going to get a kid from Alabama this year finally, and now you're going to go get a kid from Mississippi? Like, what are we doing? Like, what is happening here? When did Ohio State move to the Deep South? But they're exploring territories they never had before, and like Braylon Womack's like legitimately interested in Ohio State coming out of Mississippi. So that's a name to watch. But it feels like this could be an Ohio corners class and then a national safeties class is what it feels like to me. But we'll see how that plays out. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and then if you guys have questions or any topics you want us to dive into, feel free to put that in the chat, and we'll get to that, of course. But the other thing I wanted to mention, Jahkeem Stewart made a couple of headlines on Twitter yesterday. Was at the New Orleans Saints game. Obviously, living down there, that's not a surprise that he'd be able to go to a Saints game, but was down on the field with Chase Young after the game and posted a picture on Twitter with him and Chase Young, and mentioned that Chase Young's one of his favorite players, and got some great advice from Chase. It's weird, I don't often like take a lot of these like Twitter pictures and tweets and photos and things and like read too much into any of it, but there was a few things that was interesting for me from that picture, and one of them was not surprising, and that is how physically impressive Jahkeem Stewart is. I think a lot of people, like, we've been telling, people like didn't believe us. I think people thought we were telling like a tall tale about like this like mythical, like 6'6.5", like 285-pound, but kind of skinny defensive lineman that like, we're like, yeah, he's really not that big of a freak. I'm like, oh yes, he is. Made Chase Young look not freakish, like kind of bigger than Chase Young already. So that was fascinating. But I think Kevin and I already understood what everyone's getting into with that. We've seen Jahkeem in person. He's just he's one in a million, isn't he, physically?
I was muted. Yeah, he is crazy. I hate repeating the same stories and over again, but certainly when we were down there for his spring game on Southern Swing, I mean, he was freakish, and it was just like, all right, we're just shooting 2 cameras of Jahkeem Stewart footage out there. The down in Louisiana, you can have a spring game against an opposing school. So, I mean, it was like they weren't going to let Jahkeem Stewart get in there and do stuff. They were triple teaming him a lot. But
didn't matter.
Yeah,
didn't always matter.
He is something. He is something, and one of the biggest defensive line player I'm hearing, true freshman this year. Is a lot of talk about Dylan Stewart at South Carolina. I certainly could see Jahkeem Stewart being that type of guy wherever he ends up, be it Ohio State, USC, or if he gets trapped into staying at home, which isn't necessarily what I think is his first choice.
Yeah, so that was kind of one thing. I was kind of laughing a little bit about how 17-year-old Jahkeem Stewart just looks very, very normal next to Chase. Like, makes Chase Young look like a normal-sized dude. The other thing, and this kind of goes back to our thought that, Ohio State does have a chance here. I can almost promise you, without being down on the field with them, that Chase Young put in a very good word for Ohio State. The one thing I know Chase does is when he has an opportunity, he does push Ohio State. Not push, I got push probably the wrong word, but he does speak very highly of his time at Ohio State, his time in the program, his time working with Larry Johnson, his time just in Columbus. Chase is a very good ambassador of Ohio State football. It's just something I know for a fact from talking to recruits and even running into Chase a couple times post Ohio State career. That's one thing there. The other thing, though, is that we talked about last week. We said Ohio State, they may not be the same type of player. He may not be the same type of player as Chase Young. He may not be the same type of player as Nick Bosa, but that Ohio State views Jahkeem Stewart as that tier of player, that unique unicorn type of prospect, the really the type of prospect that keeps Larry Johnson coaching. These are the guys he lives to recruit and mold and turn into NFL, first round draft picks. And so for him to run into Chase again on Sunday was interesting timing. But again, Chase is a guy he looks up to. Chase is a guy I know Ohio State sells in their recruiting pitch. This was a guy that we took and he was 220 pounds as a junior, and we look at him now and we think you can have this type of impact in the program. That is a guy they point to a lot in recruiting. And so I continue to feel like there are so many things Ohio State has here that appeal to Jahkeem, but it's just this whole distance in terms of the pressure that is applied to the Louisiana kids to stay home. So we'll see. But again, I think it's just this was a kind of a public, we talk about like things like privately that you guys can't really see or hear yourselves. I think this was a public thing of like, yeah, this is one thing that Jahkeem appeals about Ohio State to Jahkeem is he's a big Chase Young fan, and the guy who molded and coached Chase Young is still there and recruiting him and building a very good relationship with him. So that's one thing that's helping Ohio State right now. We'll see if it's enough. But I thought that was interesting this weekend that happened, especially after we talked about Jahkeem so much last week. So we will see where that one goes. We got a question from Mika Hanna about Malik Autry. Yes, Mika Hanna. Do we have a chance with Malik Autry? Hugh freezes a joke and threw his team under the bus. So, Kevin, you go ahead first because I've got a few. I want to kind of unpack my thoughts on this, and you can kind of take that first.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze certainly was a little bit of under the bussery after their most recent game. Auburn just isn't all that good this year. I'm not surprised. I don't think you're surprised. I don't think most people outside of Auburn, Alabama are surprised. I certainly think that there's more pressure with the question marks still around Alabama at this point under Kalen DeBoer, even though Alabama is a top 5 team nationally and has not really appeared to give a whole lot back. I think that Wisconsin that they would probably beat Wisconsin twice as bad under Saban if there weren't, the interruptions that happened at that program. But, as for Malik Autry, I mean, I still think that Ohio State's chance is the same, and I'm still going to say that it's in the slim category. It's in the slim category. Ohio State's not the only school in there trying to flip Malik Autry, so that's good in some ways that he's just not hearing the message over and over and over again from Ohio State. But it's also bad news of, okay, you move him off of Auburn, then what? I mean, there's still probably going to be a lot of pressure to stay close to home. That that puts the SEC into the mix. I'm certain that every lineman these days seems to have USC, the real SC, out in Southern California, not USC East in Columbia, South Carolina. Every lineman seems to love the idea of going to USC. It doesn't generally stick there.
Yeah. And then they don't.
And then they're gone. Poof. They're gone at that point. But I think to the root of Mika's question is that was not a good recruiting image to give with what what Hugh Freeze kind of throwing his team under the bus, and you got to have quarterbacks who can throw it to people who are not on the opposite team and everything else. I didn't get to hear the comments until Sunday when I was driving in for something in downtown, and I was listening to the college football recap show. I think it certainly gives Ohio State another toehold in trying to climb the face of the mountain, but I wouldn't say that Hugh Freeze has done irreparable damage and that this kid is absolutely not going to Auburn. I'm taking Auburn over the field bigly.
Let me start by saying, boy, it's just so upsetting that the Hugh Freeze reclamation project has hit a speed bump. Gosh, that was just it makes me want to vomit every time we talk about Hugh Freeze in like redemption or something. Like he's like totally a different person now. So let me just get that out of the way before I go on my next thing. But I tend to look at this as helping with like Naeem Offord. Like you're gonna flip to that situation. Like I think this is helping more with Offord right now. What's going on there with Autry? And we spent some time with him. We spent some time around the program back in the spring. And as we talked about earlier, it's like a stone's throw from Auburn's campus. Like, I didn't get the sense that Malik Autry committed early to Auburn because he's so enamored with Hugh Freeze. He's just this like diehard believer that Hugh Freeze is going to be the answer there, and that the program is like going to be competing for national championships in the next year or two. I get the sense from Malik Autry that he just feels like that's home for him. He's grown up there. He's from there. Him and his parents don't go out and travel. Like they're very like small town people. I don't know that it really matters who's coaching there. And I don't know that it really matters how well the program's doing. I don't know. We'll see. I just know that if you could somehow convince him to not go to Auburn, I just feel like he would go to the next closest place. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like he would just, he could go to Alabama or I'm going to go to Georgia. Like, I just feel like he would go to the next closest place. Like, I just feel like geography is such an important thing for Malik Autry that I just don't know. I don't know that even if as capable of as Hugh Freeze is of just completely deteriorating a situation, I don't know that it matters here. We'll see. Maybe I'll be wrong, but again, it's not that I got this vibe that like Auburn just did the greatest job recruiting him and he's got this great relationship with Hugh Freeze, and like that's different because then if Hugh Freeze like blows up this year and gets fired or something, like whatever, like yeah, you'll go find another school. I don't feel like that's his real tie to going to Auburn. I just don't. So I don't know unless you pick up Auburn's campus and just like move it a few hours away. Like I don't know what the answer is to really flipping Malik Autry, but we'll see. I'll say it this way: if there were a situation where Malik Autry could be turned off by Auburn, I think we've taken steps 1 and 2 toward it. I'll put it that way. Like Auburn's doing itself no favors right now. I mean, that's a fact, but I don't know. I'm just very skeptical about that. So we'll see. I think there was I have not seen, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kevin. You want to read the question? You're on mute.
It's because the cat's walking around the house meowing. Feel bad for Jamarcus Weiss. Is that the pronunciation?
I believe so.
His team's offense is terrible. Have you seen him play, and thoughts?
Yeah, so I have not seen him play in person. So I can't really comment on that at this point. As far as Trotwood is concerned, I am a little surprised that they're having trouble. They've got a lot. They still have a lot of athletes. They brought up a bunch of kids to Ohio State's camp, so that looked like, that's kind of my initial thought to your comment, is like I'm a little bit surprised by that. But no, I haven't seen him play in person this fall. I would like to see Trotwood play this fall. I think that will probably happen. But so I will speak on his ability, my thoughts on him as a prospect and everything a little more. Like, he was up at camp, so like he's a very athletic kid, good athlete, good size. But as far as like actually watching him play football in person, I've not had a chance to do that yet. Yeah.
Landon Kramer, is Hero Canoe even playing? I'm assuming the words were left out of this, typing quickly. Haven't heard of him. He started with Tyleek Williams being out. Not every 3-tech is going to get a ton of mentions. And when you look at what Marshall did, Marshall running kind of its abridged air raid. I mean, it had air raid concepts in it, but I mean, honestly, it was a lot of run, and their biggest weapon were running little slants to where their receivers were very disciplined and did a great job of bodying off the defender. But it wasn't a game where Ohio State had a lot of pressure. I mean, they sent 4 most of the time, and you send 4 against 5, and if you're not winning your individual battle, we're not going to hear your name a whole bunch. Plus, too, Ohio State is very liberally rotating players, and this isn't situationally based. I mean, I saw Jason Moore the second series of the game, the second defensive series of the game. Jason Moore was out there, so it really wasn't a game that you're going to sit there and maybe one of your favorite lesser mentioned Buckeyes on the line was going to get a ton of run. Is at least my view.
Yeah, and I don't think, maybe we'll get an entirely different view from Ryan Day, or we'll get Jim Knowles possibly on Tuesday. I mean, maybe we'll get an entirely different view. I didn't think the front 7 played very well on Saturday. Like, if you look across their entire front 7, how many guys played like what you would consider, a really good game for their standard of play? Like, I think Caden Curry played well. Tywan Malone, which maybe ate into Canoe's minutes a little bit. Tywan Malone had some splash plays that he made. And they seemed to reward him with a few more snaps as he continued to make some plays. But yeah, I didn't love the front 7 on Saturday. That was kind of my one issue, I think. I mean, obviously I didn't think the team played like amazing. I mean, the offense was great, but like, it was just. And
there are people that are trying to put it on the line. Some people trying to put it on linebacker. I mean,
I thought the entire front 7 was meh. But look, you're coming off a way too early bye week. Big Ten plays a week, it just was a weird game. I'm not like drawing a whole lot of conclusions from the Marshall game in either direction, to be honest.
London Kramer, how do you guys feel about Naeem Offord?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I guess, gave that away a little bit a minute ago when we were talking about Malik Autry. Look, I continue to think this is going to be stressful for Ohio State until he signs in December. I don't think we're going to get some big thing here in the next week or two where it's like, hey, I'm not visiting anywhere else and I'm signing with Ohio State and there's nothing else to worry about and I'm not talking to other schools. I don't think that situation is going to happen until he signs. Auburn's the school that I've always been told to watch out for. Auburn is self-destructing right now. And so while I said I don't believe it's going to help too much with Malik because I think Malik Autry's decision is so geography-driven, I do think Naeem Offord's situations are driven by other factors. I do think playing time, being part of a winning program, of course, NIL, I think a lot of those factors are at play with Naeem Offord, which makes Auburn deteriorating helpful. So that's a thing where I think, again, I'm still not going to sit here and pat everyone on the back or brush any hair and say, hey, everything is fine. But I think if you're Ohio State, you're wanting Naeem Offord to stick. Auburn is doing the things Auburn needs to be doing to make Naeem Offord's decision to stick a little bit easier, in my opinion. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, obviously, if Auburn was going to try and win them over with an NIL deal, that isn't changing at this point. I mean, that money is still going to be there. Ohio State's going to have to be competitive in the NIL space, but going because you have affinity for the Auburn program at this point or the direction of the program, I think that's left open to interpretation. I think there are a lot of things that are left open to interpretation as to your view of if they're going to be able to do this. Now, if it just comes down to being a cash transaction, and 5 years ago we would never be saying that, at least because that would be all illegal and stuff like that, and we wouldn't want to sit there and look like we're talking ill of the kids. But it's very real now. I mean, if it's just a matter of this is for economic purposes, and Auburn's coming in at plus 45% of what Ohio State does, then you gotta roll with the punches at that point. But I don't really necessarily think that Auburn sits in a better spot today than it did 2 months ago, 1 month ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever. I mean, if anything, I think Auburn is starting to fade.
They're definitely harming themselves right now. It's just a matter of if it's a fatal amount of self-harm or if it's just a couple of bumps and bruises. But Auburn's doing what Ohio State is hoping Auburn would do, I think, right now. And so we'll see if that continues and kind of how that plays out. Thoughts on Shahn Alston? Mika Hanna. Thoughts on Shahn Alston? He's a dominant monster. That is Painesville Harvey in Ohio, Northeast Ohio, running back Shahn Alston, 2026. Yes, he is a dominant high school running back. No question about it. Very explosive, very strong, great numbers. Does not play like the top competition in Northeast Ohio, but still a very impressive player. I like him. I think in a class that we know, if we knew like it's going to be a 2-back class in 26, I think the Alston decision becomes a little bit easier. What I think Ohio State's trying to figure out is like 2026, probably a 1-back class. It's very let's put it this way, very possibly a 1-back class. We don't know what the future is going to hold with transfers and things like that, but the numbers would suggest that 26 could be a 1-back class. So with that said, Carlos Lachlan is going to be he's going to have to be very picky. He's going to have to be very, very, very careful because he may only get one. Ryan Day may. Now, Locke's going to go in there and I want 2 backs. And Ryan Day is going to have to get security in there because he's not going to be able to restrain him if he gets angry. But it just, again, I think it's a product of right now it being maybe more likely than not that it's a 1-back class. And so you offer an in-state kid and you take it, say goodbye to everybody else. So I just think they're proceeding with some caution there. But again, we go back to the 105 number and can they take 2 now because it's the 105 number and you need to, then you have 6 scholarship running backs or something like that. It's very possible. I will go off on a quick tangent here. We continue to talk about 105. It's just easy to say 105 because that's the number. In talking to people at Ohio State and in talking to people at other programs who I have told me they're going to operate the same way, I'm not convinced we're going to see Ohio State operating at 105 scholarships annually. My guess is we're going to see them split the difference, and we're going to see some number in the mid to high 90s because what coaches have told me is that it is hard enough right now to keep an 85-man roster with, you're losing 15 kids to the portal every year. So it's almost impossible to keep an 85-man roster right now and to keep 85 players happy. How are we supposed to keep 105 happy? So that's the Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama problem. The Kent State and Ball State problem is we're barely surviving financially at 85. How are we going to do this with 20 more? How are we going to feed 20 more? It's not even just the scholarships because that's, in a way, that's subsidized by the rest of the student population. Like, how are we going to feed 20 more athletes? How are we going to travel, more athletes? How are we going to do all these other perks they get? So when we talk about 105, just realize we're saying 105 because that's the max. It's going to be the new cap. But the real number is probably like 95, 96, 97.
What I want to say kind of about the running back situation too is, all right, you're going to lose 2 backs after this year. You're going to lose Quinshon, you're going to lose Trevion. I think that maybe you only do get, for 26 where you are, where the numbers rotate to and everything else, you might be one in a transfer or something like that, because you look at where you are in terms of your depth. I think everybody very much is in love with what Quinshon Judkins has brought to this program. I don't think that Ohio State is going to be able to pull that coup off that many times, but it was a hell of a coup it was. I just, I think that it's going to be a situation that people are going to be pounding the table and getting angry, and we're going to have to answer a lot of Alston questions because Ohio State's not going to offer him quickly enough. Because as Mark says, as I say, you offer an in-state kid, you have to be ready to accept that commitment at that spot. You do not want to sit there and be like, whoa, slow your roll. We were just kidding. We're not ready for you yet. So, Ohio State has to know where it stands there. We're still starting to really kind of learn Carlos Loughlin's recruiting strategy. It's not necessarily something that's like, just wash, rinse, repeat. That it's like, oh, well, what Tony Offord did is what Loughlin will do is what the next guy will do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have to kind of learn what their strategy is and everything else. I think that he is the type of back that Loughlin would like. But, I think that we're just going to have to kind of wait and see what happens there. And I think there's going to have to be a decent measure of patience, because it's not going to be something that resolves itself in the next couple weeks.
And just like a quick look ahead at the numbers, like, unless I've completely miscalculated here, when the 2026 class arrives on campus, so when the 2026 class are freshmen at Ohio State, I believe the Buckeyes will already – again, there could be a transfer. I'm not saying that, but just in terms of how the breakdown is right now, Ohio State is scheduled to have 5 scholarship running backs, right? I mean, you got Peoples, you got Williams Dixon, who am I missing?
Then in the next class, Isaiah West.
So maybe it's only you got, so maybe it's only 4.
It's 4. I think that's.
It is 4. Okay,
I always felt they were going to need a transfer. I mean, I think that people.
4. I had 6 in my head because I was initially adding the 26 kid to make it 6, and then I was like, or wait, is it going to be 6 anyway? Or is it going to be okay? So it's going to be 5. It'll be 5. A 26 back would make 5 scholarship running.
Makes the 5th, yeah, because 2 and 2.
So, like, how many backs are they going to have? Like, historically, it's been 4 or 5. And it hasn't always been 5. Like, it's always been like, historically, it's been 4, maybe 5. So
Peoples will be going into his contract year. That'll be year 3. And I think he'll be gone after 3. I think that's the trajectory he's on.
Yeah. So as you kind of do the math on this, it's like, okay, they could probably go either direction on that, but they're probably not in a situation right now where they want to have 2 committed. So we'll see. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I could certainly see the case to take 2. But again, we don't know what they're going to do in the portal. Do they want – because, like, next year you're going to have Peoples and then a whole bunch of freshmen, because
William Dixon is getting a little taste.
He might redshirt, though. He might still redshirt. So you may have Peoples and 3 freshmen. So if that's the case, well, that is the case. So to Kevin's point, you may go portal. And if you portal – and it's not a 1-year rental like Judkins, does that change your math on 26 and what you want to do there? So there's I think let the season play out, let the transfer period play out this winter, and probably we'll know a little more about like what the number might be at running back in 26, probably in the spring. But yeah, I mean, right now I think they're operating under some caution that they don't want to get spread too thin here with offers and and get in a situation where they're only taking one. All right. Yeah. Or Mika Hanna says Oregon scares me with Offord. Look, Oregon's a great program that recruits nationally. That's for, the almost 20 years I've been covering recruiting. You always take Oregon seriously when you're in a recruiting battle with them. Yeah, I mean, Oregon's probably in the same situation that Ohio State's in right now, right? Where it's like, even though he's committed to Ohio State, if you're Oregon, you're like, boy, it's great that Auburn's doing what Auburn's doing right now. Because I think if you're Oregon, you at least you know what you're up against with Ohio State. Like, it's kind of like a thing. You go up against them for 5-star kids fairly regularly. But like, I think you want the Alabama school out of there. I think you want this. Yeah. I think you want, and just like, so we'll see. Like I said, Auburn's the one that I've been told to watch for. Auburn's the one that I know. Look, I'm not saying Ohio State's not worried about Oregon. Ohio State's always worried about whoever's they're recruiting against. But I know Ohio State's had a specific skepticism about Auburn. So we'll see. But yeah, it's definitely not over yet for Ohio State. They've got to close that. That's not done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that Phil Knight is trying to go all in at this point to see a natty before his time on this earth comes to a close. And, they're very, very aggressive right now in terms of their NIL and everything else at this point. And, yeah, they should be scary because people will be like, well, I mean, Dylan Gabriel only has a year left. Don't forget that they also have, what was his name? The kid from the state of Michigan that went to UC, Dante Moore. Dante Moore. I mean, they've got their quarterback in waiting there. We've seen them be able to go out and get Evan Stewart through the portal, do some things like that. So, I mean, there's no reason not to be concerned. But, Mika, I'd be concerned about Oregon without Offord, honestly. So, I mean, I don't know if it necessarily changes the math all that much. I mean, certainly having a, top 1, top 3 national corner recruit coming in and probably stepping in as a true freshman, there's obviously going to be concern there. But I think that let's not look at the small scope. Let's look at the large scope. Oregon's going to be a problem, period. I mean, I think that that's just honestly the stance that needs to be taken out there. So
yeah, I mean, Lanning is certainly not perfect as like a game day strategist. I've seen some stuff there where it's like, boy, I can't believe they did that. But he is 1000% an elite recruiter. He was one of the best recruiters in the country when he was at Georgia. And so when you put a recruiter like that at Oregon, that's going to make, especially now NIL with being legal and everything else. And Oregon does have money. They got more than Phil. They got a very interesting kind of booster network there. It becomes a situation where, as I said on the board like a couple weeks ago, it's not hard to envision a Big Ten that goes through Ohio State and Oregon most years moving forward. Like it's not hard to envision a situation where Ohio State's biggest hurdle every year to winning the Big Ten is Oregon moving forward. That is not a hard situation to see. So as long as Lanning's there, they've had great success. They had great success under Chip Kelly, who we know as a head coach is not the greatest recruiter in the world. I mean, he kind of put a lot of that on his assistants when he was a head coach. They've always done pretty well recruiting, and they've never really had a dynamic head coach recruiter, in my opinion. Until these last few years, and we're seeing, and they had Mario Cristobal, who I think falls probably in that category as well. So they've kind of had this elite recruiter at the head of the program the last 3 or 4 years, whatever it's been, and we're seeing how that takes their recruiting from really, really good up to like an even bigger level. And so that's going to be a recruiting rival moving forward. It's definitely going to be an on-field rival moving forward.
Yeah, I agree that Oregon is just going to be an issue, period, if you're a fan of any of the other 17 Big Ten teams, and that you're going to have to beat Oregon, plain and simple. I mean, it's going to be a thing of you may not have them on your regular season schedule, but they very well could be sitting there waiting for you in Indianapolis, and they're going to have creative ways of of their recruitments. And of course they have, their 10,000 different uniform combinations and everything else. And whenever Ohio State talks about, maybe putting gray sleeves back on, gray stripes on the sleeves, and everybody goes sideways about it, at Oregon, you're going to have 12 games and probably like 8 different uniforms or whatever. So, I guess, some people are like, well, I wish we had that with Oregon and everything else. I'm like, there are a lot of old time fans that would have, an aneurysm over that. And to Mozart Ghost's comment, I wish we had Uncle Phil. SEC would hate us even more. Ohio State ain't lacking for having big boosters. They're there. We don't normally talk about some of them. I mean, some of them may be unbeknownst to us, but I mean, there's some that we do know of. And Ohio State ain't hurting. Ohio State certainly has a couple of different revenue stream ideas of how it handles its NIL. I mean, you get your biggins to write massive checks, and then you get everybody else to write $10 a month checks or whatever. But, the $20 million team comes together just fine for Ohio State.
Yeah, they're doing okay. Yeah, to the Oregon uniform thing, I think it's almost shameful they don't wear those. And they've been wearing them a lot, but the old school yellow helmet with the green like block O or whatever it is on it. It's not really a block O, I guess. It's just a normal. I don't know. It's just like a regular O on it in green. That's a classic to me. It's like when Pittsburgh tried that like Notre Dame gold and like navy blue, and I was like, ugh. And now they finally like have come to their senses, and that old school like yellow and blue is just it's beautiful. So I don't know. I'm kind of I like when Ohio State once a year comes up with a new design. Like the All Blacks are awesome. I don't think you ever go wrong with All Blacks. But yeah, it's I'm more of a traditionalist on uniforms with like maybe, like I said, maybe once a year you bring out like an all black or a interesting combination or something, throwback or something.
People, black isn't one of Ohio State's colors, so I don't understand. I mean, you just need to put white and black on like every uniform's color palette because it is what it is. I mean,
legitimately, when is the last time there was no black on an Ohio State uniform? Like anywhere. They've always had some.
Their classic whites don't.
Yeah, the cocaine whites.
Yeah. Or even when they've done even just the road where they're just
the throwback, they have like the black letters on the helmets, right?
Right. So it's kind of
black numbers on the helmets.
It's kind of hit or miss on that, but I want to live in a fantasy world that doesn't exist to where these alternate jerseys were not being put out only as a cash grab to sit there and sell merchandise.
Well, good luck. Good luck with that.
I know. It's the world of make believe.
And I want world peace, and I want my politicians to be honest. And yeah, okay.
No, I know we're never going to quite be there, but stop doing the stuff like, especially with like the grays, and even with the blacks to a certain extent, where it's like monochrome and you can't read the numbers or the names. And it's only worse when you're covering the game and you're up in the press box, sitting up there with the good.
Oh, that's right. You guys on the beat making you guys the annual Ohio State beat tradition of making the uniform, the alternate uniform decision about you guys instead of about everyone else watching. It's about you guys.
Nike is making the decision about Nike. I mean, they're just like, well, we just want to sell uniform tops or whatever. I mean. Again, I think like if you go like the NHL and you have like the third jersey, the third sweater or whatever, and we're going to get more run out of it. I love the Chicago Blackhawks. They have two different black jerseys. They have one that's with the traditional Native American head, and they have another one that is more of a throwback to like the 50s. And I still haven't really been able to pick one of those up. That's the next uniform jersey top that I would buy for myself. And I'm probably 5 years away from doing something like that because I just don't buy a lot of sports gear.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Flyers all blacks. When they go all black, that's not really their natural. I mean, they've always been the orange has always been kind of their main color, but I like those. The Flyers do the same thing, and so, like I said, I don't think you can go wrong with like an all black concept. I think they always look sharp, but. Yep.
Jump in here. Yeah, the Rod Farva says black is absolutely an OSU color. Absolutely. I mean, and again, we learned today that the Iowa game will be a 3:30 kick, CBS, and they've already kind of been teasing potentially that being a blackout game. I think everybody took the leap that meant it was going to be a 7:30 NBC game, but it's not. So, we'll see if this is just a repop of a black uniform that they've worn before, or if they bring in something with some changes or whatever. I mean, the black helmets have the red Buckeye stickers, which
I love that look.
Which again are hard to read, but I don't care about that during the game. Something I'll question. I don't know if anybody's noticed this, and I've been thinking about asking Ryan this tomorrow. There seem to be fewer Buckeyes stickers on helmets this year, that they are being much more stringent with either the criteria or the grading out or whatever. Is that a result of maybe that they're just not really cutting the mustard in the eyes of the coaches? Or is it that the coaching staff has turned up the volume on the difficulty of getting Buckeye stickers based on how talented this team is, how long the season could be, everything else? But I really feel that I was watching like 5 minutes last night. I've already watched the game back through for offense. I need to watch it back through for defense now. That's kind of how I do it. So I can stay offensive minded, then I can stay defensive minded. But I don't think I've seen anybody with more than like 8 Buckeye stickers through. And I know that was only through 2 games, but I remember games where you could get 7, 8, 9 stickers yourself. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've as we kind of see what the commenters think, that is kind of, I never really thought about it. And then someone brought it up. I don't know if it was you or Tony or someone brought it up. It was kind of a topic of discussion a few days ago or a week ago. And yeah, I haven't, I noticed it finally on Saturday because I hadn't noticed it. And then it was like brought up and I'm like, oh, maybe there's something to that. I can't say I paid super close attention to it over the years, but yeah, that would be interesting to know, like if they've changed the criteria, like, or if they've made it more difficult, or if it's being maybe used as more of a motivational factor this year, where maybe the bar has been set higher. I don't know. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to find out from Day.
Yeah, I was going to say Mozart's Ghost, Mika Hanna, and CW2. I'm assuming we're going Roman numerals there. All think that there's something to it or whatever. Again, I'll ask tomorrow. I'll ask during the interviews. I kind of have been working the question through my mind of how best to. You have to ask a question in a way to where you don't issue them an off ramp if they don't really want to go into it. So I've been tightening up the screws on how I'm going to ask it. So we'll see if I get called all the way in the back row with the cameras. But you can also remember you can watch the Ryan Day press conference on Tuesdays at 12 o'clock, give or take, over here at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. But we're caught up on questions.
Yeah, we're over an hour. If anyone's got anything else, get it in now and we'll go over it. But just want to kind of thank everyone for showing up to these every Monday afternoon. This is, I think, the 3rd straight Monday we've gone at 3 o'clock. So it's 3 in a row. We got a streak now, right?
I'll eventually remember it without you reminding me at 2:30.
Three's officially a winning streak. So we'll continue to do these at 3 p.m. on Mondays, except for post-Oregon game. And you know what? Even post-Oregon game, let me keep you guys updated on that. I may just go solo at 3 p.m. on Monday just to kind of keep things rolling at the same time every week. But we'll see about that. We'll keep you updated on after the Monday after the Oregon game, as I know our guys will be traveling back from flying out of Portland, right?
Portland. Yeah.
So
one last one. Mika had asked it earlier. Is thoughts on Chaz Coleman? Yeah,
super interesting. He's a 6'5", 225-pound athlete out of Warren Harding High School, Northeast Ohio, Youngstown area. Basketball kid, has some, I think at least some D2s, if not some low D1 basketball offers. Is he a tight end? Is he a defensive end? Is he what is he? That's kind of like, I think, one thing. He's obviously he's raw, but he's picking up a lot of steam right now. he's got some Big Ten offers. He's got, Ole Miss. He is really starting to gain some interest. And so I haven't seen him in person yet. That's another guy because he's very late on the scene. That's a guy I probably need to go up and see just to kind of figure out what we're working with here. But I'm always intrigued by guys like this. I'm just historically, I've always been intrigued by like the 6'5" basketball kid. Like there's kids over the years that I've evaluated off of their bat, like a kid that, he ended up being highly recruited, but early on when I was covering him, I was starting to talk about him. He wasn't, was Austin Traylor out of Columbus Walnut Ridge, was like similar to this type of kid, similar measurables, ended up at Wisconsin, had a cup of coffee in the NFL. Like I'm always enamored with these types of players. Usually they're these 6'5", like jumbo tight end receiver types. Sometimes they're the 6'5", or sometimes they're like the 6'7" center that realizes he's not going to be a center and becomes an offensive tackle. Like I'm always curious about these types. And so I'm interested here. It may be worth it for Ohio State. We'll see. But yeah, there's a lot of schools jumping in on him right now. And I will do my best to get up there and see him as soon as possible so we can have some maybe some game film and kind of a real evaluation on him. But yeah, it's one of those interesting late bloomers, basketball athletes. And so I always, Malik Harrison was kind of like that. Ended up at Ohio State, was a basketball kid early on that was also playing quarterback, but I think he had hoop dreams. I know he had hoop dreams. I talked to him about it a lot. And becomes a really good football player. So we'll keep an eye on him. I'll try and have a more in-depth, I guess, update on that situation once I can learn more about him, get up there hopefully and see him. But appreciate everyone. I think that'll about do it. So I thank everyone here for jumping on and commenting or asking questions. And hopefully guys listening later will continue to do so as well. We appreciate all your support. We'll see you over at BuckeyeHuddle.com. I have my chat tomorrow, so you can also jump on the premium message board at BuckeyeHuddle.com and ask me anything. This is generally a recruiting show. My chat, I get a lot of recruiting questions just because I'm a recruiting person, but you can also ask me about anything. We talk about the NFL, we talk about hockey, we talk about the team, obviously the Buckeyes, and so we a lot of different topics we get there. So jump on over at BuckeyeHuddle.com tomorrow and do the live message board chat if you want. But thanks, guys. We'll see you next Monday.